What if I told you that hidden beneath the majestic stones of Westminster Abbey lies the body of a queen who could have exploded like a ticking time bomb, shattering the silence of England's greatest cathedral? Beneath the gilded arches and solemn choirs of that sacred place sleeps a secret so dark, so disturbingly human, that even centuries later it clings to the air like a phantom. This is not merely the story of Queen Elizabeth I, the woman once called Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the monarch whose reign shaped the very identity of England. This is the chilling tale of what awaited her not in life, but in death. A tale soaked in blood, silence, and the relentless march of time, the final ruler no crown can escape. For 44 years, Elizabeth stood unbroken against rebellion's plots and the monstrous ambitions of kings like Philip II of Spain. She outwitted assassins, crushed the power of the Spanish Armada, and etched her name in the chronicles of dark history and royal secrets. Yet, in the hidden corridors of her private fears, one horror waited: that no victory could banish the savage ritual that would tear open her body after her final breath. A ritual driven not by respect, but by terror of her corpse bursting apart beneath the vaulted ceilings of England's most sacred cathedral. Today we journey into a world of forgotten secrets, of creepy royal history, and of the macabre fate that awaited a queen who ruled oceans, but could not rule decay. She was not merely a queen. She was an era made flesh, a living symbol of power, resilience, and the dazzling contradictions of a world caught between medieval shadows and the flames of a modern dawn. Elizabeth Tudor, known across history as Elizabeth I, was the monarch whose name has become an echo whispered through centuries, woven into every tapestry of dark royal secrets and immortal legends. For 44 relentless years, she commanded the throne of England, a woman wielding authority in an age when thrones were built for men. She faced conspiracies sharp as daggers, religious wars that bled across parchment and battlefield alike, and the looming specter of kings who sought her crown, most terrifying among them, Philip II of Spain, whose mighty fleets became tales of creepy royal history after she crushed the spine of the Spanish Armada. Under her iron gaze, England rose from civil fracture into a realm burning bright with ambition, hungry for conquest, charting new worlds that glittered with promise and peril. Artists painted her as a goddess cloaked in white, pure and untouchable. Writers sculpted her legacy in words of gold and reverence. To the world, she was Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the woman who made England believe it could defy any storm. Yet for all the splendor and iron rule, a single truth rippled beneath the surface. Elizabeth reigned as much by fear as by devotion. History remembers her as the mother of an empire, yet her very presence inspired trembling loyalty and the silent terror of crossing a queen who wore her power like a blade. And though she bent kings to her will and steered nations through chaos, there lingered a darkness Elizabeth could neither conquer nor command. It was the darkness waiting beyond breath, beyond crown, beyond mortal flesh. A darkness she would face alone, no matter the triumphs that filled the chronicles of royal secrets and dark history. For even Gloriana, England's radiant monarch, harbored a dread no victory could banish. A dread of what hands might do to her body once life fled her veins. A dread of knives, of rending flesh, of the cold slab that awaited the mortal remains of a queen who ruled oceans, but could not rule the final silence. And that more than any armada or rebellion would become the most chilling chapter of her story, a chapter that begins with the savage rituals of embalming and ends in the shadows beneath Westminster Abbey. Behind the blazing portraits and the shining crown, there pulsed a heart that knew fear, a woman who had learned that even queens bleed, even queens fall. For Elizabeth, thy supreme ruler of England, the greatest terror was not the plots of foreign kings, nor the clash of steel upon the seas. It was the darkness that waited beyond her final breath, the savage rituals lurking in the hidden corridors of royal tradition poised to claim her flesh when her spirit fled. In the silent hours of her reign, amid whispers of royal secrets and conspiracies that festered like wounds, Elizabeth watched power shift and crumble around her. She knew better than any monarch that crowns are fragile and that blood ties mean nothing when thrones are at stake. Her own cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, once dared reach for her crown, and Elizabeth, though cloaked in stoic resolve, had signed the death warrant that sent Mary to the block, staining history with one of its darkest chapters of creepy royal history. That choice, forged in necessity, haunted her as surely as any ghost that might drift through the stone halls of her palaces. Yet amid all the deadly games of power, there loomed a fear even more intimate, more grotesque. Elizabeth dreaded what would become of her mortal shell. In her world, embalming was not an act of gentle preservation, but of violent invasion, a gruesome rite where sharp blades opened royal flesh, where the hidden chambers of a queen's body were laid bare. She recoiled at the thought of being sliced apart, reduced to a husk, filled with spices, and stitched shut like a secret too foul to speak. She yearned for a different fate, to meet her God whole, untouched, unbroken. But even as she issued commands for her body to remain sealed, she must have known the cold truth that history would remember a monarch's will can die with her heartbeat. For death is no respecter of crowns, and the rituals of preservation are driven not by reverence but by terror. A terror that the body of Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, might become a rotting time bomb ready to burst beneath the vaulted ceilings of England's holiest ground. And so beneath all the splendor, Elizabeth carried the chilling knowledge that her greatest battle was yet to come, a battle not against kings or empires, but against the knives and secrets that awaited her in the shadows of dark royal history. It is there in the stone-cold chambers where the scent of centuries lingers that her story slides into the most savage chapter of all, a chapter written in blood spices and the echoes of steel cutting flesh. In the shadow-drenched corridors of dark royal history, there existed a ritual so violent, so intimate, that it could strip even monarchs of their final dignity. This ritual was called embalming, a word that in the 16th century bore little resemblance to gentle preservation or sacred farewell. It was an act of necessity driven by fear as much as tradition. Because for the crowned heads of Europe there loomed a grim reality without intervention, the royal corpse could transform into a ticking time bomb threatening to unleash a spectacle of horror upon the very people sworn to mourn it. The process began cold, clinical, merciless. A lifeless body, once draped in silk and crowned in jewels, was laid upon a stone slab, chilled and unforgiving. Under flickering candlelight, the surgeon's blades gleamed like shards of moonlight poised to cut open secrets never meant for mortal eyes. Flesh was sliced, parted with steady professional cruelty. The heart, the liver, the lungs, the stomach, and the winding length of intestines were pulled from the cavity, glistening with the last remnants of life. And where royal organs once pulsed with sovereign command, there was left only emptiness, a hollow void soon crammed full with costly spices. Cloves, cinnamon, myrrh, each chosen less for reverence than for war against the stench of decay. This was no tender rite. It was a desperate bid to silence the corruption of the flesh, to prevent gases from swelling the body into a grotesque parody of life. For in the silence of the cathedral, the horror of a bursting coffin was more feared than any ghost or whisper of scandal. Other monarchs before Elizabeth had been carried to the grave with hidden explosions threatening to shatter both coffin and reputation, leaving entrails and decay to spill like blasphemy upon sacred stones. And so surgeons worked with ruthless precision, transforming royal remains into something safe, contained a relic, wrapped in velvet, encased in lead, entombed beneath solemn prayers. Embalming was the kingdom's final insurance policy. Against disaster, a grim barrier between reverence and nightmare. Yet as Elizabeth I lingered upon the threshold of her final hours, she recoiled from this savage tradition. She pleaded that her body remain whole, untouched by the blade, preserved not by spice and steel, but by divine mercy alone. But death is a monarch no mortal commands, and what awaited Elizabeth in her last moments would prove that for all her power, even the Virgin Queen could not escape the knives waiting in the dark. For as her heartbeat slowed, the kingdom prepared for a different battle, the battle to contain the secrets of her dying flesh and to save England from a spectacle that history would never forget. On the 24th of March, 1603, the final breath of Elizabeth I slipped into the silent chambers of Richmond Palace, leaving a realm trembling on the edge of uncertainty. The queen, who had defied king's storms and shadows, had reached a threshold no crown could protect her from. In that quiet moment, the woman behind the painted face, the one called Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, became mortal flesh waiting to be claimed by the cold rituals of death. She had begged, pleaded that no blade touch her, that her body remain whole for the judgment of God preserved, as she had lived untouched, unbroken. Yet the iron laws of dark royal history would not bow to a dying queen's whispered prayers, for the physicians and surgeons of the crown knew a horror deeper than superstition, the danger that the queen's corpse left untreated could become a vessel for rot and gases threatening to explode beneath the vaults of Westminster Abbey and stain England's farewell with an unspeakable spectacle. Duty silenced mercy, and so the surgeons approached her lifeless form with tools gleaming like silver serpents under candlelight. They opened her chest as if unsealing the secrets of a kingdom. They removed the heart that once carried the ambitions of an empire, the liver that filtered royal poisons, the stomach that churned through decades of fear and triumph. One by one, the organs were lifted from their sacred house, leaving a hollow void that no crown could fill. Into that emptiness, they packed precious spices, cloves, cinnamon, myrrh, not as offerings, but as weapons in the war against decay. It was a final, brutal irony, a queen who had ruled with such fierce control, now reduced to flesh and ritual, powerless to stop the knives that claimed her in the name of honor. And as the surgeons sealed her body, wrapping her in crimson velvet and preparing her for a journey through dark waters and darker secrets, they carried not only a queen, but a volatile mystery that could still shatter the silence of royal history itself. For even in death, Elizabeth's story was far from over. It would continue upon the waters of the Thames, where grief spectacle and the threat of a queen's final gruesome rebellion would unfold before the eyes of a nation. And so, the mortal remains of Elizabeth I, the queen who once commanded fleets and defied the thrones of Europe, were bound in crimson velvet stitched with the Tudor rose and sealed inside a coffin lined with heavy lead. But beneath the grandeur of royal ceremony, another fear pulsed like a hidden drumbeat. For those who stood closest to the coffin knew a terrifying truth whispered through generations of dark royal history, that death's silent corruption might yet explode into unspeakable spectacle. As the royal barge drifted down the grey, solemn waters of the Thames, the skies wept over London in a mourning shroud. Thousands stood along the banks, heads bowed beneath cloaks and veils, their breath white in the cold air, whispering prayers for the soul of the Virgin Queen. But amid the ritual and reverence, a strange scent coiled through the air, a sickly sweet odor drifting from the coffin, a scent that no velvet or lead could fully imprison. It was the scent of spices warring against the inevitable advance of rot, a scent that carried with it the silent warning that the Queen's body was not as safely contained as appearances suggested. For deep inside Elizabeth's embalmed corpse, gases brewed coiling like serpents in the dark. Without the surgeon's desperate work, those gases could have swollen her royal frame until wood and lead cracked apart. History's vaults remember other monarchs whose coffins burst open mid-ceremony, spewing the hideous evidence of human frailty into the eyes of grieving subjects. The risk was real, and even the mighty monarch's farewell hovered on the edge of grotesque catastrophe. It was a final savage irony that a queen who had ruled oceans and defied empires might, in her last appearance before her people, shatter into ruin. And though the lead shell held for now, there remained whispers that the coffin was a fragile barrier between royal majesty and a horror that creepy royal history would never forget. Yet centuries later, the secrets sealed inside Elizabeth's tomb would not remain silent. For in the reign of Queen Victoria, a man named Dean Arthur Stanley would descend into the darkness beneath Westminster Abbey, and what he found would change the story of England's greatest queen forever. Centuries passed, and the echoes of mourning faded beneath the towering arches of Westminster Abbey. Tourists came and went, tracing fingers over marble inscriptions, oblivious to the secrets slumbering beneath their feet. But the silence of royal tombs can be a fragile thing, and in the reign of Queen Victoria, curiosity became the key that would pry open the darkness. Into the chill underworld of England's most sacred cathedral descended a man named Dean Arthur Stanley, a scholar driven by the relentless hunger of the Victorian age for dark royal history and creepy secrets lurking beneath ancient stones. Lantern in hand, he moved through corridors heavy with dust and centuries-old rot, each step stirring the air with the scent of forgotten monarchs. Shadows flickered across lead coffins, gilded names, and the silent testimony of power long turned to dust. When Stanley reached the chamber where Elizabeth lay, he found not the glory of a queen preserved in eternal splendor, but the cruel work of time laid bare. The coffin, once a masterpiece of velvet and lead, had buckled and collapsed, its wooden frame reduced to brittle fragments. The rich crimson velvet had faded into hues of rust and ash, eaten away by the breath of centuries. Even the lead lining meant to last forever had warped and split under the relentless pressure from within. And there, scrawled upon the ruin, lingered the faint ghostly letters E.R., Elizabeth Regina, like a whisper of a sovereign who had once defied empires. Yet the true horror lay in the grim tableau above her, the remains of her half-sister Mary the Fur resting in the same narrow vault. Rivals in life entombed as neighbors in death, their bones now bound by a silent fate that blurred vengeance and eternity. In that stone chamber Stanley stood alone, surrounded by two queens whose war for the throne had once drenched England in blood. And he understood as he stared into velvet turned to dust that even royal flesh cannot escape the patient hunger of time. For the world above might have moved on, but beneath the Abbey's ancient stones a darker truth waited, a truth that reminds us that even queens who ruled oceans can be reduced to whispers of dark history awaiting the final verdict of decay and oblivion. Beneath centuries of stone and silence, the story of Elizabeth I lies entombed not merely as a chapter in dusty books, but as a haunting mirror for us all. She was a queen who bent kings to her will, who steered a kingdom through storms of war and treachery. Yet even Gloriana could not escape the truth that waits for every beating heart that time conquers, all that flesh is mortal, and that even the brightest crowns will one day fall to dust. And perhaps that is the secret she leaves us, the unspoken wisdom that power, beauty, and legend are fleeting shadows, while what truly endures is the courage to face the darkness within and without. For in Elizabeth's fate, we glimpse the same fear that whispers in us all the terror of being forgotten, the dread that our secrets will spill into the light, and the yearning to leave behind a mark that time cannot erase. Velvet fades, lead bends, even queens fall. But stories, they endure. So I ask you, which secrets from dark royal history do you long to uncover next? Which shadows would you dare explore? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. And if this journey into the forgotten corridors of history has stirred your curiosity, save this video, share it with a fellow seeker of secrets, and subscribe now to walk with me deeper into the hidden vaults of the past. Because sometimes, it's the truths we bury deepest that have the loudest echoes.